3 centuries of suspicion and discontent erupt violently into the streets of a small and pleasant town. It is 1969, and these are the scenes which the world remembers as the public agony of Londonderry, the second city of the province of Ulster. When people protest like this, risk their lives, throw petrol bombs at the police, when the forces of law and order are seen to falter in their stride, just what is wrong? The sad self-destruction of Londonderry is the outward sign of the real and imagined wrongs which are part of a problem that has bedeviled Ulster for generations. The tragic division of the inhabitants of the same land, not by colour or race, but by religion. For up to now, the most important point about a man's life and character in Derry has been whether he goes to worship his Maker here or attends Mass here, whether in fact he is Protestant or Catholic. With an ironic aptness, Derry is the only surviving example of a complete walled city within the United Kingdom. The confident pile of the Victorian Gothic Guildhall has surprisingly beautiful stained glass windows illustrating the history of this turbulent little town. It was from here, in the 6th century, that St Columcille sailed to establish the famous Iona community on the west coast of Scotland, which was to lay the foundations for a revival of learning and spread Christianity across Europe. It was here that 5 centuries later, the London merchants established themselves to exploit the benefits of the new policy of plantation, which had at last made the conquest of Ireland by the English possible. The land was colonized or planted by loyal English and Scots in place of the rebellious and recalcitrant Irish. The merchants prudently fortified Derry and decreed that henceforth the city would be known as Londonderry. This imposition of a new community, Protestant in religion, alongside the Roman Catholic inhabitants, sowed the seeds of the religious apartheid which has bedeviled the consciousness of Ulster men and women ever since. But as if that was not burden enough, Londonderry has another cross to bear. Because of its remoteness from the economic magnet of the southeast, it has long been a depressed area. Quite simply, there have never been enough jobs to go round. In the early 1950s, almost 5,000 of the working population of 28,000 had no jobs, about 18%. Some people even suggested a sinister plot amongst the politicians in the Northern Ireland government to starve Londonderry of factories and its people of their right to work. But in fact, many years before the violence in the streets had made Derry an obligatory item on any newsreel or front page, a quieter and less exciting battle had been joined. The battle to bring industry and jobs to the town, to defeat the soul-destroying stagnation of unemployment and hopelessness. In the past, the manufacture of shirts was the backbone of industrial Derry, and this in itself was a stumbling block on the path to full employment, as the majority of workers in a shirt factory are women. So new and diverse industries had to be attracted to the area. And since the Second World War, the Northern Ireland Ministry of Commerce has given Derry a high priority in its search for industrialists willing to open new factories in the area. It is not easy to persuade a hard-headed businessman that it's in his interest to build his new plant in what to him is a remote corner of the United Kingdom, and the inducements offered must be real and worthwhile. In 1967, 1/3 of the government grant for new industry in Ulster went to Derry, and it is the policy of the Ministry of Commerce to offer the most generous terms to industrialists who are willing to open factories in areas of high unemployment. And there are many other inducements offered, but the world's industrialists have many countries competing for their investment, and the Ulster Minister of Commerce spends many months of each year visiting these men to persuade them to come to Northern Ireland. Slowly and steadily around Derry, on the new industrial estates, the results are taking shape. Statistics are not as exciting as riots, but they can be much more meaningful. Factories need workers, and modern factories need skilled workers. The government training centre in the heart of the McDaid estate, just outside the city, was opened in 1966 to train people of all ages for their new jobs. And so, a ready-made skilled labour force is being built up, and its existence may well be the deciding factor in getting a new industry to the district. Nobody feels smug about this. There is still a long way to go. Current unemployment runs at 11%, well above the national average. And perhaps when a man's got nothing to do except stand bitter and frustrated on street corners like these all day, with his hands in his empty pockets, there is time to reflect on the differences between the haves and the have-nots in a town where such differences are part of a bitter legacy. In 1689, Ulster became involved in the last-ditch efforts of the deposed and exiled James II of England to regain his throne. James's avowal of his Roman Catholic faith brought him into conflict with the English people and government, and, by a remarkable stroke of fate, his major confrontation was to take place at Derry. It was his intention to use Ireland as a base for the recovery of England, and to overthrow William and Mary, who had been placed on the throne by Parliament. James landed at Kinsale and moved north to concentrate his forces at Derry. The city, so well fortified by Londoners, was now besieged by an English king. Inside the walled city, 30,000 Ulster Protestants prepared to withstand the attack of the massed Catholic forces under James. Some 13 apprentice boys saw a regiment approaching the gates. The official guard seemed at a loss as to their proper duty, so the boys grabbed their keys, slammed the gates, and locked them, just in time to prevent James's men from getting into the city. And so started one of the most famous sieges in history. Macaulay called it the most memorable siege in the annals of the British Isles, which was a polite way of describing the horrors of starvation and disease which ravaged the beleaguered city. Nearly 10,000 died during the 105 days of the siege. During those terrible days, a handful of chickweed cost a penny, a quart of horse's blood a shilling, and the same price bought a rat which had been fattened on corpses. At last, on the 28th of July, 3 relieving ships broke through the wooden boom which had been thrown across a narrow stretch of the river, and much-needed succour was brought to a near-dying city. And on August the 1st, James's army struck camp and marched away. Londonderry had come through the siege with the famous defiance, "No surrender." The action of the apprentice boys is commemorated in Londonderry with undying fervour to this very day. So the stage was set for the tragic scenes of Londonderry in 1969. And it is not the first city which has seen riots and death in its streets as the result of political actions taken many hundred years ago. The scars remain to be seen on the face of the city and felt in the hearts of its people. The city is still divided into Catholics who want a unified Ireland and Protestants who wish to remain part of the United Kingdom. It still has its 2 traditions and cultures, the orange and the green. And there are some who actually strive to ensure that this rift will never be closed, that through this valley will always flow a river of bitter religious and political bigotry. To try and allocate blame is fruitless. It takes 2 to make a fight, and you cannot legislate men's minds. These are the citizens of Londonderry. They look alike, they talk alike, they dress alike. Yet they are divided by 300 years of mutual fear and suspicion. Many of them work together in the same government-sponsored factories. But when they down tools, they separate. The Protestants to their parts of the city, the Catholics to theirs. That often means Bogside, where, as in the Protestant quarter, much of the housing is slum by any standards. But here, the city walls are an ironic reminder of ancient scores to a people whose best friends would not deny their fondness for looking over their shoulders at the past. But there are plenty of new dwellings in Bogside. More than half the slums have gone. These flats are not only used for throwing petrol bombs at the police. They are the comfortable modern homes of hundreds of Catholic families. But while slum housing and overcrowding is a nightmare which haunts every major town and city in the world, it proved in Londonderry an important factor in the mounting unrest which culminated in Bogside taking to the streets. Another factor was the long-standing dissatisfaction of the Catholics with what they have always considered unjust electoral conditions in the city. It was then that the Northern Ireland government, recognizing the seriousness of the situation, conceived a measure which even the most cynical observers of the political scene had to admit was bold, imaginative, and, given half a chance, could succeed. They actually suspended the machinery of Derry's local government. They replaced the duly elected mayor and corporation with the Londonderry Development Commission, a group of able and objective administrators responsible to no one except the Northern Ireland government, and with one positive brief. Without fear or favour, prejudice or malice, they were to pick Derry up by the scruff of its neck and put it firmly into the middle of the 20th century. Now the power was available for tackling the city's many problems. It is in the major area of housing that progress has been spectacular. Non-stop through the cold grey days of winter, the outskirts of Derry hum with activity as the architect's plans turn into bricks and mortar. Even dull statistics become meaningful when human happiness is at stake. And these houses will be allocated on a system of points, where need is the sole criterion, and a man's politics or religion are of no account. In all the recent troubles, there were no signs of conflict on new estates like this, where Catholics and Protestants live side by side, and the old traditional enmities are left thankfully behind. The Development Commission also took over the Rural District Council. So there are no hold-ups while endless arguments rage over whether country sewage can be allowed to journey through town drains and the like. There is only one solution to each problem, the quickest and the most practical. Chairman of the Commission, Brian Morton, is quite adamant about the potential success of the housing programme. He states categorically that 1/3 of the people needing new houses will be in them by next Christmas, and that everyone will be housed by 1981. There is no other city in the United Kingdom that can make such a definite promise. The Commission's General Manager, Gerald Bryan, says he intends to see that promise kept. It has been said of Londonderry that it has a bad past but a good future. Here is its future, the children, and these are their schools. In the last 15 years, 26 new schools and a fine new technical college have been built in the Derry area. This means that over 40% of the children here are taught in bright, modern classrooms. It is easy and understandable to criticize governments, but projects like these are not the result of a last-minute realization of the city's needs. They are the results of years of planning and patent concern with Londonderry's future. Like many other cities, Londonderry has a plan. The Londonderry Area Plan, published in March 1968. It is a blueprint for the development of the city and neighbouring areas. The plan has some imaginative ideas for the development of the city, preserving its fine historic buildings and strengthening Londonderry as a regional centre. It suggests improved amenities to attract industrialists and the provision of good residential areas conveniently situated in relation to places of work. It covers an overall communication system to cope with the growth envisaged for many years to come. And Londonderry's docks, once old-fashioned and badly equipped, have now been revitalized by the installation of a modern container loading service, which will make an important contribution to the prosperity of the area, which, as well as the new industries, still has an abundance of agricultural products for export. At the same time, the plan strives to conserve the outstanding beauty of the area, which makes it a natural center for the development of tourism. When the day's work is done, the surrounding countryside, so close at hand, gives the people of Derry a great advantage over many in other towns and cities in the United Kingdom. Within easy reach, they can enjoy some of the most beautiful scenery and countryside in Europe. It is unspoilt and has a peace which is today so hard to find elsewhere. A haven which many other more economically fortunate people would gladly sacrifice a lot to enjoy. One man may look at a glass and say it is half empty. Another will say that it is half full. Pessimism is easy, optimism less so. No one denies the difficulties of the task of giving Londonderry her rightful place amongst the cities of Britain. But there are two solutions to the problem. One, short-term and practical, is being tackled vigorously. The other is larger and infinitely more difficult to solve. Its solution lies in the hearts and minds of the people of Derry. Londonderry has no eternal flame burning over the tomb of an unknown warrior. There are reminders enough of the stranglehold of history over the city. This flame burns throughout the night and day over one of Derry's much-needed new industries. It is the symbol of prosperity and a pledge of confidence in Londonderry, a city with a future.
And all the flowers